Do you believe that just one overheard conversation could change someone's entire life? Mark Evans, a busy, successful CEO, used to think he knew every corner of the empire he had built from scratch. But one day, disguised as an ordinary employee, he overheard something that stopped him dead in his tracks inside his own store. It wasn't a complaint. It wasn't a scheme. It was a simple act of kindness, quiet, but powerful enough to shake him to his core. One unknown employee, one small action, and one big secret waiting to be uncovered. That day, Mark didn't just find an extraordinary worker. He rediscovered a part of himself he had long forgotten. Are you ready to step into a story that will make you believe kindness? No matter how silent, always finds a way to be seen. If you're ready, comment "I'm ready" and let's dive in. Mark Evans tightened the laces on his sneakers, pulled his baseball cap low over his eyes, and took one last glance in the small mirror inside the back of a delivery van. The worn hoodie, the faded jeans, the patchy stubble, they had successfully transformed the powerful CEO into a completely unremarkable man, a face lost in the crowd. A small smile tugged at Mark's lips. It had been so many years since he last walked into the real world without a name tag, without the heavy armor of power, without the respectful glances. Taking a deep breath, Mark pushed open the van door and merged into the crowd flowing toward Evans Mart Branch 3, one of the busiest locations he had proudly opened years ago. Inside the store, the atmosphere was buzzing. Young moms darting through the bread aisle, elderly men shuffling carefully, picking out bargain items, clusters of teenagers giggling over soda cans. The beep of barcode scanners echoed non-stop, blending with the whoosh of the automatic doors sliding open and closed. The harsh neon lights illuminated every carefully stocked shelf, but they couldn't shine on the quiet stories unfolding every day within these walls. Mark pulled his cap lower and made his way to the customer service desk. The store manager, Joe, a kind-faced man with a slight paunch, greeted him with a warm smile. "Hey, you must be Mike, right? HQ said they were sending someone to help out. Mark? Now?" Mike nodded, doing his best to keep his voice casual. "Yeah, Mike here. Happy to help." Joe handed him a temporary name tag and pointed toward the front shelves. "Today you'll help restock near the entrance and assist customers if they need anything." Pretty straightforward. Mark nodded, grabbed his task list, and began his first real shift in years, not as a CEO, but as a regular employee. He loaded a cart with crates of snacks and drinks and pushed it down the main aisle, quietly, taking in everything around him. The first thing Mark noticed was life here moved faster than any quarterly report he'd ever read. It wasn't just numbers. It wasn't just sales margins. It was in the nods between customers and clerks, in the giggles of a little boy receiving a free candy sample from the bakery counter, in the worried glance of a man counting coins at the milk aisle. Mark soaked it all in tiny details no spreadsheet could ever capture. While stocking a shelf of snack bags, he heard laughter from the checkout lanes. He looked up, and for the first time that day, he saw a face that stood out. Ryan, a young man in his early 20s with messy brown hair and a smile so bright it lit up the whole checkout area. Ryan was chatting with an elderly woman struggling to bag her groceries. "Need a hand, Mrs. Peterson?" he asked warmly, as if speaking to a beloved relative. "Esther Swarriers." Peterson chuckled and nodded gratefully. Ryan packed her groceries with care and casually asked, "How's your garden coming along, those tomatoes you planted last month?" "And this all right, Miss..." Peterson beamed, launching into a story about her first ripe tomatoes, and Mark found himself smiling without realizing it. In a place as busy as this, Ryan still remembered each customer's little world. Not because he had to, but because he genuinely cared. Mark kept pushing the cart, but his eyes stayed on Ryan. There was something about this young man, something that couldn't be captured in sales figures or customer satisfaction rates. Something Mark could feel in his bones, even if he couldn't name it yet. And he had no idea that just a few hours later, Ryan would turn this undercover trip into the biggest turning point of his career and, maybe, his life. Ryan worked the checkout lane like he was born for it. Every smile he gave was real. Every greeting, heartfelt. Mark watched from the snack aisle, taking it all in. Ryan wasn't just scanning products and punching buttons. He knew his customers, the busy moms, the slow-moving elders, the shy kids clutching candy bars. "How's your daughter doing at her new school?" "Mr." "Illy, did your grandson win his soccer game?" "Mrs." "Grant." Small questions that made customers smile. That lit up their weary eyes. Mark nodded quietly to himself. Across dozens of stores and hundreds of employees, it was rare to find someone who could create a personal connection like that. Later, when a young mother struggled to count change while holding a wiggling baby, Ryan didn't rush her. Instead, he smiled, cradled the baby for a moment, and helped her finish packing her groceries. They both laughed, a soft, genuine laugh, and Mark felt something tug inside his chest. There was patience in Ryan's eyes. A kindness so natural it didn't need to be announced. Mid-shift. Joe handed Mark another assignment inventory, checking in the stockroom. As Mark wheeled his cart to the back, his mind lingered on Ryan's laughter, his ease, his small but powerful acts of humanity. In the stockroom, Mark noticed a stack of milk crates, neatly moved aside clearly to make way for a wheelchair. And sure enough, a few minutes later, Ryan casually walked in, rearranging the crates even more carefully without anyone asking. Not everyone noticed things like that. Not everyone cared enough. Mark's heart stirred again. Because sometimes the greatest kindnesses aren't the grand gestures. They're the quiet, unseen choices people make simply because it's the right thing to do. And slowly, without even realizing it, Mark's heart was beginning to change. Late afternoon, the crowd inside the store began to thin. Mark was assigned to help Ryan restock the shelves before closing time. "Hey, Mike," Ryan called out, first flashing a friendly smile. "First day, huh?" Mark chuckled, adjusting his cap. "Yeah, just trying not to mess things up too badly." Ryan laughed heartily. "You're doing just fine. Better than I did on my first day. That's for sure." His voice was warm, easygoing, without a hint of condescension or judgment. They worked side by side, stacking bags of snacks and bottles of water onto the shelves. And between the repetitive motions, a quiet sense of camaraderie began to bloom. Mark casually asked, "So, do you like working here?" Ryan nodded without hesitation. "I do. It's not about the paycheck. It's about..." the people. He glanced toward the front window where an old man was slowly making his way out of the store with a small bag of groceries. Some folks, they just need someone to be kind to them, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Mark stayed silent. He realized Ryan wasn't just working. He was doing something far rarer in this fast-paced world. He was making people feel seen, heard, and valued. As they finished restocking the last few shelves, Ryan turned to Mark with a bright grin. "You're gonna fit in just fine here, Mike." Mark nodded back. But inside, a plan was already beginning to take shape. This young man, Ryan, wasn't just a good employee. He was a rare treasure, something Evans Mart could never buy with any paycheck. And Mark silently vowed, whatever it took, he wouldn't let a soul like Ryan be forgotten among the cold numbers of revenue reports. He just didn't know yet. That was what he was about to discover about Ryan. And Ryan's life would be bigger and far more heartbreaking than he could have ever imagined. The next morning, Mark returned to the store at dawn, still playing his role as Mike the ordinary worker. The first light of day stretched across the sidewalks, but what burned brightest inside Mark was an unstoppable curiosity. He needed to know more about Ryan. He needed to see for himself. Was what he felt yesterday just a coincidence, or something much bigger? Around noon, the store was bustling. Mark was assigned to stock shelves right across from the checkout lanes, just a few feet away from Ryan. He tried to focus on his task, but kept his ears tuned sharply. And then it happened. An elderly man, frail and stooped, approached Ryan's checkout lane. He wore a threadbare jacket and carried only 2 items: a small loaf of bread and a carton of milk. 2 simple things. But with the way the old man hesitated, they seemed as heavy as the world itself. Ryan greeted him with his usual warm smile. "Morning, mister." "Thompson. How's everything going?" Mister?" Thompson smiled weakly, his eyes tired. Mark heard the barcode scanner beep twice. Ryan read the total softly. "That'll be $4. 25. The old man fumbled in his jacket pocket, counting out a few coins. His face fell when he realized he had less than $3. Maybe I'll just take the bread," he mumbled. Ryan didn't hesitate. He leaned closer and whispered, "Don't worry about it, mister." "Thompson. Today's on me." Mr. Thompson looked up, startled. "Ryan, I can't keep letting you do this. You'll get into trouble." Ryan just smiled, his eyes glowing with quiet kindness. "It's fine. I've got it covered. You just take care of yourself, okay?" And as if it were the most natural thing in the world, Ryan scanned his employee card, paying the difference from his own account. "Mr." Thompson stood still for a moment, then reached out and squeezed Ryan's hand, murmuring a heartfelt thank you. Mark stood behind the shelf, feeling something electric pulse through his chest. He could hardly believe what he had just witnessed. In a world where money seemed to dictate every breath, a young man making minimum wage was quietly spending his own earnings to help others, doing it unseen without seeking recognition. Mark barely had time to recover before witnessing even more. Later that same afternoon, a single father with 2 small kids. Ryan slipped an extra pack of cookies into their bag without charging. A young student short a few dollars for lunch. Ryan smiled and covered the gap without a second thought. All done quietly. All unnoticed by managers or corporate systems. But for Mark, every small act echoed like a ringing bell. This wasn't about showmanship. This wasn't a gimmick for good PR. This was a way of life. Ryan had chosen to step beyond the strict letter of the rules, to preserve something far more sacred, simple, unshakable human kindness. As the shift neared its end, Mark and Ryan stood together tidying up the front aisles. Mark casually asked, keeping his tone light, "You're pretty generous with customers, huh?" Ryan shrugged, grinning brightly. I figure if a few bucks from me can make someone's day a little better, it's worth it." He said it simply, naturally, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Mark stared at him for a long moment. Inside, he knew. This was the turning point. Ryan's story had to be known. It had to be protected. But just as that thought crystallized, another sharper realization slipped into Mark's mind, chilling like a sudden gust of cold wind. A young man who lived so kindly must be carrying a burden of his own, a hidden pain much deeper than the world could see. Mark clenched his fists. He made a vow he would find out the truth. And this time, he wouldn't just stand by and watch from a distance. The golden sunset washed over the gray brick walls of Evans Mart. Another long day had come to an end. But for Mark, The real journey had only just begun. He knew that to truly understand Ryan, it would take more than quiet observation. It would require a real conversation. No disguises, no pretense. That evening, the shift ended earlier than usual. While the staff was busy tidying up the shelves, Mark spotted Ryan sitting quietly in the break room. His shoulders slightly hunched, a weary look in his eyes. Mark grabbed 2 cans of soda from the mini fridge and walked over. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, holding one out. Ryan looked up, offering his familiar warm smile. But now, Mark knew the world of sacrifice hidden behind it. "Sure, Mike." "Thanks," Ryan replied. They sat down together, silent for a few moments, the soft pop of soda cans opening the only sound. Finally, Mark spoke, keeping his tone casual. "You're really something, you know, that most folks don't go out of their way like you do." Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm not special. It just trying to do my part, I guess." Mark leaned back, staring at the ceiling as if lost in thought. Then he asked slowly, "Where did that come from?" "That instinct to help." Ryan fell silent for a long moment. Then he sighed, his eyes lowering to the calloused hands resting in his lap. "My dad, he always said, if you have a little share, a little..." The words pierced straight into Mark's heart. Ryan continued, his voice soft, as if retelling a story he'd carried alone for far too long. "My dad was a mechanic. Worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week. Never complained." Ryan's eyes softened, shining with distant memories. "He taught me and my little brother that no matter how little we had, there was always enough to help someone else." Mark nodded quietly. "He sounds like a good man." Ryan smiled, but it was a pained smile. "He was... until the accident." Mark held his breath. Ryan took a deep one instead. 3 years ago, a drunk driver ran a red light, hit him on his way home from work. His voice grew hoarse. He didn't make it. A heavy silence settled over the small room. Mark felt his throat tighten. Ryan shrugged, trying to steady himself. "After that, it was just me and Jake, my little brother. Mom, she couldn't handle it. She left a year later." Mark frowned, his chest tightening. "Left?" he asked gently. Ryan nodded. "I couldn't deal with it. Too much pain, I guess. So it was just me and Jake. I dropped out of college, started working full-time to keep us afloat." Mark looked at the young man sitting in front of him. And in that moment, he no longer saw just an employee behind a checkout counter. He saw a silent warrior, a soul who had fought against lost responsibility and profound loneliness, without ever asking for anything in return. Ryan let out a soft, bitter chuckle. "Sometimes it feels like life just keeps punching you over and over." Mark tightened his grip around the soda can. He wanted to say something big enough to ease Ryan's pain. But he realized, sometimes just listening is enough. Ryan took a sip of his soda, shaking his head slightly. Bad. You know what, Mike? Helping others. It keeps me standing. His eyes lit up again, a small but steadfast flame. If I can make someone's day a little less hard, then maybe everything we went through wasn't for nothing. Mark swallowed hard. Throughout his long career, he had met countless brilliant people, countless top employees. But none, not a single one, had ever made him feel as small as humbled as this young man did now. A boy carrying the crushing weight of life on his shoulders, who still chose kindness over bitterness. And Mark knew in that moment, Ryan wasn't just someone to reward. He was a symbol, a living reminder of everything Evans Mart and maybe the world was supposed to stand for. Mark gently squeezed Ryan's shoulder, a simple gesture, but one that carried deep respect. And deep inside, A silent promise rose within him. I won't let you fall. Not on my watch. The next morning, Mark arrived at the store earlier than usual. He stood silently in the parking lot, watching the familiar scene unfold inside. Everything looked normal. Customers coming and going, employees bustling about. But Mark knew beneath that ordinary picture something wasn't right. There was an undercurrent, a quiet storm, only he seemed sensitive enough to feel. By mid-morning, Mark was assigned to the back storage area just as he had planned. The perfect spot to listen, to observe. While restocking heavy boxes, Mark heard quick, familiar footsteps approaching. Light, hurried, uneasy. Ryan's voice, low but filled with worry, floated through the air. Man, I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. Mark froze, feeling his heart tighten in his chest. Another voice. Bill, the older, longtime employee, answered. You're thinking of quitting. Ryan let out a long sigh. Yeah, I love this place. I really do. But between the bills, Jake's school fees, and everything else, it's getting too much. Mark stood there motionless behind a stack of boxes, holding his breath to catch every word. Ryan continued, his voice sinking lower. I barely make rent. I'm constantly worried if Jake's got enough to eat, enough to wear. And I can't even afford to take a full day off when I'm sick. Bill stayed quiet for a moment, then said softly, You've been carrying too much on your own kid. Ryan gave a hollow chuckle. Feels like I'm drowning. And no matter how hard I swim, the shore just keeps getting farther. Mark closed his eyes. Those words, heavy raw, struck straight into his heart. He thought of Ryan's bright smile, the way he lifted others even as he was sinking himself. The way he kept giving when he had so little left to give. After Ryan and Bill walked away, Mark sank down beside the stack of boxes. A slow, burning anger rose within him. Not anger at Ryan. Sator endiova. Tabato ias ad at dessa sedanind adiao. Iendan dao dayat the system. At a society that allowed someone like Ryan, with a heart so pure, so rare, to be left fighting for survival alone. No one had noticed. No one had reached out. If Mark hadn't been there today, if he hadn't chosen to step down into the reality he had once left behind, Ryan might have disappeared from Evans Mart. Worse, Ryan might have disappeared from the life he so deserved to fully live. Mark clenched his fists. No, he wouldn't let that happen. Ryan wasn't meant to be a quiet star that blinked out unnoticed. He deserved to shine. That evening, Mark sat in his small hotel room, the dim lamp casting a soft glow over the hastily scribbled notes spread across the table. Right in the center of the page, the name Ryan was circled in bright red. Mark stared at that name for a long time. In his mind, a plan was taking shape, clear, deliberate, meticulous. Not just a promotion, not just a raise, but real change. A new life built on the gratitude and recognition Ryan so deeply deserved. Mark smiled, a quiet but unwavering smile. Tomorrow, everything would change. Not just for Ryan, but for Evans Mart as well. He would start with a small gesture, one that would light a fire that would never be extinguished. And in the stillness of the night, Mark whispered to himself, You held on for so long, Ryan? Now, it's our turn to hold you up. The next day, Mark arrived at the store with a heart full of excitement and something heavy weighing deep inside. Today, he would no longer be Mike the temp worker. Today, he would stand as Mark Evans, CEO of Evans Mart. And more importantly, he would bring the people here something they truly deserved. The truth and the recognition they had earned. By mid-afternoon, Joe the store manager was wrapping up the shift paperwork when he received an urgent internal message. Gather all employees at the main checkout area immediately. Urgent. Joe frowned, puzzled, but complied. Within minutes, everyone from the checkout counters, the stock rooms, to the delivery department had gathered. Ryan was there too, lingering near the back, still holding half a cup of unfinished coffee. Mark stepped forward. For the first time in days, he stood tall, pulling off the old baseball cap that had hidden his graying hair. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some confused glances. Some heads are shaking in disbelief. Mark smiled, his voice carrying clearly across the room. Good afternoon, everyone. I suppose some of you know me as Mike." The group burst into laughter, a ripple of amused, surprised chuckles. Mark continued, his eyes gleaming with sincerity. "But my real name is Mark Evans." Silence dropped like a heavy curtain. Mouths fell open. Ryan stood frozen, the coffee cup trembling slightly in his hands. Mark nodded, confirming. "Yes, I'm the founder and CEO of Evans Mart." No one said a word. Mark inhaled deeply, then spoke slowly. "I've been working undercover here for the past few days. I wanted to see for myself what life is like on the front lines, what our employees experience, what our customers feel." He scanned the room, each face filled with confusion, worry, excitement. His gaze settled firmly on Ryan. And then Mark continued, his voice steady. "And what I found, it was not just hard-working people, not just efficiency or good service." He took a step toward Ryan, his tone dropping. "I found something even rarer. I found heart. I found kindness." Ryan shuffled back half a step as if wanting to disappear into the crowd. But Mark raised a hand, signaling for him to stay. "Ryan Mark," called his name, drawing every eye toward the young man. "You're not just a great employee. You're the soul of this place." Ryan flushed deep red, his hands clenching tightly together. Mark smiled warmly, moving closer. "I watched you. I saw how you helped Mr. Thompson. How do you make sure no child ever leaves here hungry? How you treated every person with dignity and compassion." The room was no longer silent. Small gasps, soft sniffles echoed around. Mark pressed on, voice thick with emotion. "In a world that often feels cold and transactional, you, Ryan, reminded me what it truly means to be human." He turned back to face the entire room. "And that's why, effective immediately, Ryan will be promoted to store manager with a full salary raise and bonus." The crowd erupted into applause. Some whistled. Some shouted Ryan's name with pride. Ryan stood, frozen, tears brimming in his eyes. But Mark wasn't done yet. He raised a hand, waiting for the cheers to quiet down, then declared solemnly, "Additionally, Evans Mart will sponsor Jake's Ryan's younger brother's full college education. All tuition, all expenses, fully covered." Ryan gasped audibly, his lips trembling, unable to form words. Mark met his eyes, voice gentle, because no one who gives so much should ever have to fight alone. The applause exploded even louder, yet Mark still wasn't finished. He lifted a large poster board, revealing bold letters. "Today we are also launching the Ryan's Hope Fund, a special assistance fund for any Evans Mart employee facing hardship." The room fell into stunned silence. Then cheers broke out like a wave. Ryan covered his face with both hands, overcome by emotion. Bill, the older co-worker, stepped forward and wrapped him in a hug. Joe, the store manager, clapped him firmly on the back, his face beaming with pride. Mark smiled, a smile full of admiration, full of gratitude. Amid the thunderous applause, Mark thought to himself, "A good heart, no matter how quiet, will always find its light." And today, that light was Ryan. Ryan stood frozen in the middle of the room, his hands trembling as he clenched them tightly together. His eyes were a whirlwind disbelief emotion and overwhelming confusion. The entire store seemed to fall silent, holding this moment just for him. Mark stepped closer, his gaze gentle, full of deep understanding. "Ryan," he said slowly, as if every word had been carefully chosen. "You've spent your heart caring for others. Now, it's our turn to care for you." Ryan shook his head, his voice choked with emotion. I didn't do it for this. I never expected anything." Mark smiled warmly, his eyes unwavering. "That's exactly why you deserve it." Another wave of applause roared through the store, sweeping over everyone like a crashing tide. Ryan wiped at his tears, but they kept spilling over uncontrollably. He looked around, saw Bill smiling proudly, saw Joe clapping so hard his hands turned red, saw all the co-workers he had struggled alongside now cheering as if they had all won together. For years, Ryan had fought his battles alone. No one noticed. No one knew. And yet today, all the lights, all the attention were shining directly on him. Someone who had always believed he was too ordinary to ever be seen. Ryan stammered through his tears. I just wanted to help. That's all." Mark nodded, resting a hand lightly on Ryan's shoulder. "And that's what makes you extraordinary." Mark then pulled a small envelope from his pocket, handing it carefully to Ryan. "Inside," he said, "is the full scholarship agreement for Jake. No more worrying about tuition, about books, about anything." Ryan clutched the envelope, his hands still shaking. His voice was barely a whisper. "Jake. He always dreamed of going to college. I thought I'd failed him." Mark shook his head firmly, his gaze steady. "You didn't fail him, Ryan. You gave him hope when no one else could." Ryan hugged the envelope to his chest as if it were the most precious treasure he had ever held. But Mark wasn't finished yet. He held up a small key glinting under the overhead lights. "And this is for you." Ryan stared at the key, bewildered. What's that?" Mark smiled gently. "A fully paid apartment lease. Closer to the university. Closer to a new beginning." Ryan's eyes widened in disbelief. An apartment. A real home. A place where he and Jake wouldn't have to struggle through every single day. The entire store erupted into cheers, whistles, and joyful shouting. Ryan broke down completely. The coffee cup slipped from his fingers, forgotten, as he covered his face with both hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs. Mark stepped closer, leaning in to say quietly, just for Ryan, "You don't have to carry everything alone anymore." Ryan took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to steady himself. He lowered his hands and looked up at Mark, and for the first time in years, there was something different shining in his eyes. "Hope?" Ryan nodded, the words breaking free in a trembling breath. "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me." Mark gently patted his shoulder. "No, Ryan. Thank you for reminding all of us what really matters." That day, the Evans Mart store wasn't just lit by the cold glow of neon lights. It was illuminated by something far warmer. The light of human kindness. From the thunderous laughter, from the heartfelt hugs, from the genuine selfless congratulations. That day, Evans Mart didn't just celebrate an outstanding employee. They celebrated kindness, compassion, and the unshakable belief that no matter how harsh life gets, the most beautiful things will always find a way to shine. Mark watched Ryan, now surrounded by coworkers, laughter, and warmth, and felt a peace settle deep in his soul. He knew the decision made today wouldn't just change Ryan's life. It would change Evans Mart forever. It would change how they would move forward. From now on, they would no longer just be a chain of convenience stores. They would be a community, a place where every act of kindness, no matter how small, sakbo, be seen and cherished. 3 months after that fateful day, Evans Mart Store 3 had transformed from the inside out. It wasn't just the new promotional signs or the flashier sales campaigns. The real change lived in the atmosphere itself, in the genuine smiles exchanged between customers and staff, in the hugs, the warm handshakes, in the small, quiet acts of kindness now encouraged, celebrated, and spreading. And at the heart of it all was Ryan. Now, as store manager, Ryan wasn't just running day-to-day operations. He was inspiring. He was training new hires to see customers not as walking invoices, but as real people with their own stories, their own struggles, and their own hopes. A new program called Share a Little was born, founded by Ryan himself. Each week, a portion of the store's earnings was set aside to help customers in need. And customers felt the difference. They didn't just come to Evans Mart to shop anymore. They came to feel something, to be reminded that no matter how hard life got, there were still places where kindness was cultivated and cherished. Jake, Ryan's younger brother, had started his freshman year at college, fully funded. The day Jake held his student ID in his hands, Ryan cried. No more sleepless nights worrying about tuition. No more painful sacrifices over every single meal. Jake could finally chase his dreams because his older brother had believed that hope was worth fighting for, and all of it had started with a simple smile, a small loaf of bread, and a whispered act of compassion at the checkout line. Mark Evans stood quietly outside the glass doors of the store, watching the lively, bustling scene inside, laughter handshakes, customers chatting with employees like old friends. He gripped the metal doorframe, overwhelmed by a surge of pride too deep for words. When Mark founded Evans Mart, his dream wasn't just to build a retail empire. It was to create spaces where kindness wasn't seen as weakness, where every person felt seen, respected, and valued. Years of chasing numbers and cold marketing campaigns had made him forget that. But Ryan, with his quiet acts of grace, had brought that dream back to life. And today, watching it flourish, Mark knew everything they had been through. It was worth it. One late afternoon, as the store began to empty out, Mark and Ryan stood side by side outside the entrance, bathed in the warm glow of sunset. The scent of freshly baked bread drifted out from the food counter inside. Mark turned to Ryan, his voice low and steady. "You know, Ryan, you didn't just change a store. You changed lives." Ryan laughed shyly, scratching the back of his head. "I just tried to do what felt right." Mark nodded, smiling. "And sometimes that's all it takes." They looked out at the busy street where everyday life carried on, where even the smallest actions could spark waves of change, unseen but unstoppable. Before leaving, Mark placed a firm hand on Ryan's shoulder, his gaze unwavering. "Promise me one thing," he said. Ryan tilted his head. "What's that?" Mark smiled wider. "Keep being you." Ryan squeezed his shoulder back, his eyes shimmering under the fading light. "I promise." And so from one small moment at the checkout line, from a young man quietly giving away spare change, a journey of change had begun. A journey that proved kindness, no matter how small, no matter how unseen, will always find a way to shine. And sometimes all it takes is one person choosing to love, for the entire world to grow just a little warmer. Maybe after all, what changes the world isn't grand gestures or heroic headlines. It's the silent hearts like Ryan's, the ones who choose compassion even when no one's looking. Are you ready to be someone who sparks that kind of light in your own life? If this story touched, you share it. because you might be the hope someone else desperately needs. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. We'd love to hear about the moments of kindness you've witnessed. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss more powerful true stories like this. Stories that just might change the way you see the world. Because change doesn't start with the crowd. Change starts with you. We'll see you on the next journey.